growing weary of running from room to room, practicing one-tooth insurance-driven dentistry? Then stay tuned for the latest episode of The Lionhearted, where Dr. Stephen Rasner will hand you the blueprint for what many call the gold standard of general practice dentistry.
Hi everyone, it's Dr. Steve Rasner here, and you are tuned in to The Lionhearted Dentist. And here we are. I'm going to try to make this one this week because I know a lot of you are getting busier. And I am completely flattered by anybody during these times that tunes in to this podcast to give you a few pearls. And what I've tried to do, as you know, for the past couple months is give you a sense of what I was doing to navigate through the pre-reopening stage, which none of us knew when that was going to be, to what it's been like. This will be the third podcast. And what I've learned that I really do think is working for me, and I'm hoping I can share and help some of my colleagues around the United States and abroad minimize the bumps and maximize the good that's available right now. And I did have some new takeaways this week that I do indeed want to share with you. And the first one, before I give that one, please, I tell you this every podcast, and a lot of you do email me. It's my name, Dr. Dr. Rasner, R-A-S-N-E-R, at AOL.com. And that tells me more than anything if you're listening. And should I keep doing these? And that's the truth. I'm sitting here on a Friday afternoon. I've never missed doing one of these yet. And I've tried lately to not put any ahead of time, which is beneficial to me. It gives me a little relaxing zone, because I wanted to keep it as relevant as possible right now for you, because I think that's the most important thing. You know, and that brings me to my first revelation of the third week back, and that would be, don't listen and jump on board to any one thought leader right now, including me. I mean, listen back. Does it fit your paradigm? Does it really make sense in your world to do what some of the folks out there are doing? Let's start with the PPEs, for example. And, you know, I go out on a limb when I say this to you, but it's really just what I've done. And I'm not ever going to come on these podcasts and make up stuff for you. I'm going to tell you exactly what I'm doing. And, you know, I didn't go all in on foggers and air filtration systems and these kind of things. Naturally, I have all the PPE equipment, N95s, and all the other things we're doing. My thinking is this, just one more time, and I really feel affirmation in giving you this advice, and that is, I don't think there's anything you can do. A hazmat suit, a completely $100,000 air filtration system, which was actually offered to me by somebody that I've done business with before and trusted. I don't think there's any measure you can do that's going to completely eliminate the possibility of a droplet of contagion working its way through the air and making it to the skin of one of you or one of your staff members, or vice versa to the patient. I think you have to draw the line for you. And I got to tell you, I mean, going back with the protocols we have employed that I picked up like you did, from webinars, from going online and seeing what other people are doing, I feel really that we're doing a tremendous job enforcing completely new ideas that we never did before, none of which make this any easier. And I'm sure you're doing the same, and to me, that feels like enough. You know, I am seeing 65% of a patient load compared to what I was doing pre-corona. Just that in itself is quite different. I mean, we've been over this on the podcast, calling them in out of the car. By the way, a friend of mine named Ziv Simon wrote a book during this time called The Corona Protocols or something. I have it, and would send it to any of you that online email that would want it. It's an online, it's free. I have to warn you that, and he's a tremendous mind, but he is all on board with all this kind of stuff. way beyond what I've implemented. To me, what I've implemented is behavior and basic personal protection per in staff member, which of course affects the patients in the chair. That's I always hear me use the word lines in the sand, and that was my line in the sand. And I got to be honest with you, unless you're willing to test like the professional athletes are going to be doing, and they're coming back, talking about coming back into the arena in the next couple months, they're going to test them every single day. It's going to cost millions of dollars. Unless you're willing to do that, then you got to define, and I don't think there's any convincing or overwhelming evidence of where do you stop. So I'm sorry, that wasn't even the intent of this podcast, and then I don't know why it annoys me that I've been solicited. I feel like I'm preyed upon. That's what I feel. And I know it's happened to many of you. If you're a believer in me, of what I've laid out for you, which I'm about to get to in detail, then I'm not doing that. And that's the truth. So be careful who you jump in on or who you listen to. And the other thing is how hard this road is back. How hard this new road for you, those of you that are now back and those of you who are about to begin, has very proportionate, in my opinion, to the following three things. One, and I got to be honest with you, it's refreshing takeaway from me. It's an affirmation to me that the advice I've given you over the last year plus has been dead on, because I didn't know it would save me in a pandemic situation, and it has. And let me explain. And you can start and learn from this and buy into this going forward, because I have absolute evidence it's saving me right now. I mean, let me just say this to you. I've been back 3 weeks, 2 shortened weeks of 3 days each without any hygiene. And the week that just passed, we had hygiene back, 75 minutes per patient, about 6 patients a day. And I'll tell you how I manage that as well during this podcast in just a minute. And as I mentioned to you, I'm seeing a limited number of patients. And I'm going to tell you something. I don't want to tell you the exact numbers because I don't want to come off like that, but they've been exceptional. I mean, way. I did not know what to expect. I told you this if you go back a month or two ago. I cautioned you about erring on the side of being conservative, which I still have evidence that that's a smart approach. But when you develop a relationship-based practice, and listen to me, don't waste your time. If you don't know what I mean, what I really mean when I say that, of having your staff on board, so patients know for sure that you know who they are. When I say that, I mean everybody in your practice. Why else should patients come to me in an economically depressed part of the United States that's immeasurable, when I'm completely surrounded by offices where they know they can get their work for less money, where some of the hours are more convenient than my hours, where they can take their insurance and literally get reimbursed more instead of coming to me? How do you think I possibly could pull that off over all these years, before Corona and now? Because it's something that's palpable. And remember, I'm not doing this in an area where the average economic social status or income would be considered high in this country. And I'm still comfortably doing that. So that speaks to me that you could do it in any state in the United States, in any country, of the many of you that tune in to me. This is not a mirage. This is real, what I've done. And I'm not bragging on it. It's a lot of work to have a relationship-based practice and to care about that and to watch your staff embody that and embrace that. But if you want more of that information, as I said in the beginning of this podcast, then write to me. But if you didn't have that, I think it's a harder road. I mean, let's we have an insurance-driven 25 patient a day practice where you literally don't have the time to get to know patients and bond and speak to them and have extensive new first patient visit appointments of length and you don't bring in their significant other, and it's just your standard, what we've all heard about for years, dental practice. I don't know that your patients are going to respond the way I've experienced such in the last 3 weeks. I think so the first factor is, how much of a relationship-based practice do you really have? And you can fix that, man. It's not even a costly thing to fix. That's the beauty of it. It's a principle for you to embrace, for you and your team, because you can't do it alone. It's a palpable thing. Patient comes in, everybody really knows their name. And if you're sitting there watching, what does that matter? Everybody knows their name, and it's all fluffy, and we all give each other a hug in the morning. We don't do any of that. It's a place, probably like the place you go, if you really thought about it, where you do repeat business, whether it's your veterinarian, your primary care physician, your bank, wherever you go. Somebody in that arena of business makes you feel more value. And you certainly aren't going to keep going back like to a place of business like I've happened to all of us, where you feel like a nobody. You're just like nobody. We've all experienced that. This is the antithesis of that. And there's specific things, and you can't make it happen with a 5-minute meeting. Hey, we got to have a relationship-based practice. It requires depth and structure and body behavior and talk and protocols to embrace. Number 2 is how large your practice nucleus has an impact on what you're going through right now. Well, why? I have a huge practice nucleus. And when I say that to you, this has been talked about on other podcasts, how to do that. Basically, in a nutshell, it's not your way or the highway. You do have to have parameters that you will not overlook. So here's the easiest one I can give you. They come in to have a tooth fix that requires a crown, but they have a sea of inflammation that they're not aware of or have never treated. And in my office, the soft tissue is always treated, 100% of the time, because that is a cornerstone for me of good health, for me, for my patients, for long-term preservation of the work we provide. But I don't have to replace every tooth in their mouth. And so that's an example of not my way or the highway. Well, I should say, if they refuse to treat their soft tissue disease, then I would decline to treat that patient. It's true. It just doesn't happen. It's not if it's presented properly. But there are other patients that don't accept my treatments. And even if they accept nothing, the system is set up so that when they leave the office, it is not a negative feeling. It's a positive feeling, perhaps, wow, I would like to do business with them. Because a lot of times, they've never been asked to spend money out of their pocket. And it is a huge paradigm shift for them in going to the dentist or the dental office. And they're not ready to make that change. That's what people that listen to this podcast, I hope, are following. And the bigger that nucleus, because a lot of people in the nucleus of your practice, and that's what I've experienced in the last 3 weeks, it hasn't been all people that were about to do work anyway. Some of them are people I haven't seen in years that did leave my office a couple years ago. It happened yesterday. In fact, the patient that came in yesterday used to come to me, left us because we don't take her insurance. I mean, you know these stories. Her husband never left us. She has a problem. I'm not sure exactly why she chose, but I was grateful that she felt comfortable enough to come back, which is one of my favorite patient type cases. And, we're doing a minor amount of work on her. And then the third part about how difficult this road is for you is where you are in your career. Naturally, if you're a young dentist, and I know many young dentists listen to me and listen to this podcast, even D2, 3, and 4 students. If that's the case, yeah, this is, but you have a lot more energy probably than a lot of people my age that have been in this a long time. There's a counter to that. But, if you just bought a practice and you've invested a lot of money to the banks, that's a lot of pressure that a guy that's been practicing 40 years almost like me may not feel or have. So we're not all in this together equally. But I want you to take away from this, if you don't have a relationship-based practice, or if you don't really understand the minutia that goes with that, that's the time to write to me. I'm not selling you anything. I will help you. I've never had more phone calls I've made. You know, people want to know that are my close circle, why don't I monetize this? And even I ask that question sometimes to myself. I don't know. I guess I'm plenty okay the way things are. I don't know what the real answer is. So to summarize that, one of the takeaways early on to me is that having a relationship-based practice, having a large nucleus that spins off various patients all the time that did not accept prior work with us or fell off once they were, but left and still had good appreciation for the organization we put together. And certainly where you're at in your career impacts you. So be careful who you listen to is what I'm saying, because we're not all in the same war right now. And indeed, it does feel like a war. The second message I want to give you is how sustainable the early success that I've experienced is. I'm not sure. And this is what I mean by that. We are presently in early June. I don't know what's going to happen in July and August, especially August, when a lot of the stimulus package money falls out on people. My suspicion is it's not going to have a big impact on my practice, because over the years I've been able to attract people that are in the twilight of their careers or even retired, which to me is the gold. Don't take offense to this, but sorry if you do. I mean, I speak what I see. Those of you that know me well, that have been listening for a while, I had a brief rendezvous with a practice in the city of Philadelphia, which is where I live. And that practice was very different than my practices. I bought an existing practice, and it was young, always looking at their watches, worried about their parking meter kind of patients. To be quite honest with you, most of them seemed broke to me. It was a totally different practice that the doctor before me had nurtured, whether he liked it or not. I guess I want you to take away the blueprint here. When we went through Corona, when we're going through this amazing, unique time in our lives, I never thought for 1 second, even on all the podcasts I did for this, I never thought that all the groundwork I did over the years, I did that groundwork because that's the practice I wanted. I mean, wouldn't you want that? Wouldn't you want to come in and feel connected to the patient you're about to treat, as opposed to you don't even know who he is? What's his insurance cover? Oh, you're doing 2 crowns today. Oh, you're doing 1 crown today, because that's what his insurance covers, despite what he actually needs. Oh, you're going to skip the soft tissue care because his insurance has poor coverage on that. What do you think that I did what I did because it was just based on it would be high revenues for me? No, it's a lot about, mostly about the climate and providing what I think is really, really good health care to my patients, and them appreciating it. And don't let this come away as it's perfect nirvana, because even when you give and do your best, there'll always be patients that don't get it, that disappoint what's in your heart and misread you totally. And it's, in my opinion, it usually comes back to money. I mean it, like money trumps often the cost for that patient. And in many, many cases, the new, never happened before your practice cost of reaching in their pocket, sometimes that outweighs the message that it's worth it. I only say that to you because it's happened to me for sure. And I don't want you to think that means it didn't work, what you put together. What I'm recommending, oh my God, it is so worth it. It is so worth not seeing 20-some patients a day, which I've done in my career. I have. I can remember thinking I had a great day because I prepped 25 teeth. I never, ever think about that. So you need to go back and think about what it is that makes you happy. And I'm, being redundant at this point, but that style did not hurt me with Corona. I thought it might. It's helped me. And these patients that come in, are such responsible people and are such fine people to work on. And I feel gratitude that I have that. And again, if I can have that in this part of the United States that I chose to practice in, there's nowhere you're practicing right now at any country or any state that you can't duplicate what I've done. Because the geographic area and the economic climate of where I practice would be, in most professionals' minds, not a favorable place to open up such a practice. And I have defied that, not for a year, for 39 years. What kind of message am I putting out right now? Have I gone back to marketing and that kind of thing? Again, I have to say to you, the message of trust, that they can trust you, they being your patients, that they can trust you and should trust you. I had a patient in yesterday. I want you to know this. This is one of the few times this has happened. He had a molar. About 65% of the molar needed restoration. Previous restoration, part of it lost. And I would have been more comfortable with crowning that tooth, and I gave him a cost for it. He was not vehement against it. He looked me in the eye and says, "Hey, doc, is there any way right now you can just do your best and restore it?" Or he didn't say that, but, put a filling in it. And I put a filling in it. It happened twice yesterday, actually. And that hasn't happened very much. But I wouldn't care if we were struggling and we had no case acceptance, which we do. I would do that all day long, as long as I felt by doing that it would not jeopardize the patient further, result in a fractured tooth, to the best of our clinical judgment, result in a need for a root canal or something like that. Yeah, I think the message of trust, and I use the radio right now. I have not gone back to, and I have a beautiful ad. Again, last time I'll say this in this podcast, but if you want to have me send you the ad, I'm able to do that in an email, and you can replicate it if you want. Watch it a few times, write down the words, and broadcast it in your local radio station. I've gotten a lot of compliments on it from patients. I love the radio advertising genre. It really depends where your practice is at. But I'm not using hard copy right now because I think a lot of people don't want to touch hard copy. And there's some confusion about, how long the virus lasts on this or that surface. So that's the reason why. Even though the revenues in my situation have spoken otherwise, as if I could go right back right now and with the revenues that are coming in, full-blown advertise everywhere. Really not doing that. I'm going in soft, just like we're practicing soft, meaning that I'm only seeing about 65%, which I'll tell you one more thing. I kind of like it. I don't know if it's sustainable because it's a little too confusing right now with the lack of having to pay payroll because of PPP money in the United States. But I probably am not alone when I say there's something to be said about slowing down 30% of what you used to do. I give myself a ton of time. I always did. But I'm giving myself maybe 3 hours now for implant surgeries that I would give myself 2 hours for. And it's almost, it's much more enjoyable. I'll put it to you that way. We're getting kind of lengthy in this, and I do want to talk about leadership in my next podcast. And when I say that to you, I don't want you to be turned off because when I say leadership, when I hear the word leadership, I think of a lot of books and a lot of idealistic, virtuous publications that don't apply to the real world, especially for us in the dental profession. So you can bet your butt that isn't what you're going to get from me next week. You're going to get real world, like what does leadership really mean right now? And I can tell you what it means more than anything, just in a nutshell. It means not putting things on the back burner early on if I think they're mistaken, if I think they need to be attention to. So I can tell you, for example, my front desk part of my office, in terms of a staff, they tend to be very socializing. They love to talk about nothing, which I've always said, I don't care if you do that, as long as you make my patients feel like they're the only person in the world, and as long as you get your work done. But I noticed very early, like I'm seeing, my hygiene team is seeing 6 patients per day right now instead of 8 to 10. I don't have room for even one break. You can't not confirm the hell out of all 6 of those. And that happened one day in my office this week. This was our first week back with hygiene. I didn't let it ride for a day or two. I was on it that afternoon that I witnessed it happen. I went to the front and I went to my hygiene department. I told them what I'm telling you. I said, look, we got 6 patients right now coming in here. I don't have room. I don't have any leeway for broken appointments. So it's not business as usual when you're confirming these people. That's what I told the confirmation department. And I told the hygiene department, it is your responsibility to look early in the day, look at that schedule. Do you see anybody that has a history of a break? Do they all look strong? Do you need to call any of them and reinforce anything? Because I need the 6 to come. That's leadership right there. It's not some theoretical philosophy of this or that. And I'm going to deal with that next week for you. I'm going to deal. What do you do if your personality is in that way? I'm actually doing a webinar next week for an organization, the Maddow Brothers, completely on leadership. But I'll give a private one to my people that follow the Lionhearted Dentist. Last thing, what I do with hygiene. Because think about it. You're going to run into this. You're going to run into being gowned, gloved, getting ready to sit down in a room, and somebody comes in and says, I need a hygiene check 2 minutes after you sit down. Not too cool. So what do? What I did is had a meeting with my hygiene team. I delegate. I let them know that we've seen these patients for years, most of our patients. If you feel comfortable that they are fine and don't need an examination, if that's okay with the patient, we're going to pass this time. Secondly, I want you to inspect and question them before you get started. Do you have any problems? Is there anything going on in your mouth? Because I want them to come to me and I'm aware of before I go into a room to do my work, to go and check hygiene at that point if I have to. We're also using an iPad to show me x-rays or to show me even photographs that we took intraorally on situations that they were unclear of. So the 3 things are, we're organized, much more in tune to I am, as before I enter a room to do treatment, does anything in hygiene, I'll stop in the hygiene department. Do you need me to check anything? Before I get all gowned and gloved to go into my room where I'm working. And that so far has worked out pretty well. This week, I have 2 hygienists. So I'll keep you posted at how that's going to be. Just be more organized, be more mindful, go back to having your morning meetings so you can anticipate. Maybe you'll know in the morning meeting you have to go to see the 3rd hygiene patient. Hope this helped a little bit, guys. Thanks for tuning in all over the world. God bless you. We can do this, man. We can do this. It's not nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be. See you next week on The Lionhearted.